All right, everybody. Hello. Welcome to the weirdest start, perhaps, of getting to know a residency, talking about Joe Stevens' pizza making skills, but he is really good at it. Just so everyone knows, we are recording this. Feel free to private message me if you have a problem with that, and we will stop recording it. But this is for future use if you have questions later or for somebody who couldn't make it. My name is Ashley Deutsch. I'm one of the associate program directors of the emergency medicine residency at Baystate Medical Center in Springfield. And we are so excited to have you guys here today. Thank you for coming on this Labor Day evening. I don't know if it's raining where you are, but it is for us. We are going to talk today about meeting our chief residents and also meeting our residents of every year. The idea behind this is to understand what they think about Baystate and the area that they're living in the program, and also to answer any questions that you might have. So the chat is open. Please feel free to write questions in the chat, either for the general group, or you can send something to me and I will make it an anonymous question should you want to. But with that said, we're going to get started. So I wanted to first introduce our chief residents for this year, and I'm going to ask them to give us their name and where they grew up and where they went to med school, and then a little bit about why they chose Baystate. So Dr. Stevens, since you have made such an impression with your pizza making, Joe wanted to be introduced as the party chief, which he is, and so I will turn over the floor to him.
I did not want to be introduced as the party chief. I just want to make that totally clear. But if that is the title that I'm given, I've been called a lot worse. My name's Joe. I grew up in southern Maine, in the Lakes region, if anyone is familiar. Went to high school in Portland, did my undergraduate at Northeastern in Boston, and then didn't really know I wanted to do medicine for a while leading into that, and then was working in research for about 5 years after, before I went to med school. I went to med school at Pikeville in Eastern Kentucky. Loved it, had an absolute blast there in Appalachia. Rotated at Baystate as an ultrasound student with my first away rotation like in July, and lived in the fun student housing that they have across from the hospital, and absolutely loved it. And that is why I chose Baystate.
All right, we'll move on to Dr. Steph Ayala.
Hey, my name's Stephanie. I grew up in upstate New York around Saratoga Springs. I went to med school out in southern New Mexico, and I chose Baystate because when I rotated here, out of all the places where I rotated, I saw basically the strongest residents, the highest acuity, and I knew that I wanted to train in a place like that.
Thank you, Steph. And one of our chiefs just joined us after shift, Dr. Alex Estrella. And Alex, we were asking you to tell everyone your name and where you grew up, where you did med school, and why you chose to come to Baystate.
Sure. Sorry, I'm Alex. Sorry I'm late. I had to come home and tend to the kiddies real quick. I grew up in just outside of Fall River, Massachusetts, just like Jules, in a slightly smaller town. I went to UMass for undergrad, where I did nursing and rotated through the Baystate health system. Then went down to New York for medical school and wanted to come back to Western Mass for residency. Had seen and worked in the system before and was super stoked to come back to a place that kind of felt like home for most of my residency experience.
Awesome. So we do have one other chief resident who's working in the department, Sarah McHugh. I put in the chat link that takes you to our webpage, and you can actually meet each of the residents by class there if you want to take a look later. You know, Sarah was bummed that she couldn't be here. So next up, we'll introduce a few of our second year residents. And Dean, let's start with you.
Hey everyone, my name is Dean. Like Ash said, I'm one of the second year residents. I'm from the coast of Massachusetts, like up north of Boston. I went to UMass undergrad, so around where Baystate is now. And then I was a social worker for 2 years, didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then went to UNE up in Maine, lived there, fell in love with Maine, hopefully gonna go back to Maine. And then ended up at Baystate. I actually didn't rotate through, but I'd heard amazing things, both of the acuity being super high And then also the culture, which has rang true on both accounts, and been super happy since.
Thanks, Dean. And next up, we'll have Jules introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Julianne. Most people call me Jules. I'm a second year. I'm originally from Fall River. And from high school and college, I was always a math, oh my God, I almost said math hole, but that's what I was born and raised. I went to Stonehill, and then I went to New York for med school. And in between, I scribed for a year, mainly in the emergency departments. That's where my first kind of exposure to EM really came. Like most people, that's where it kind of starts. And it continued through med school, through rotations and everything. And when I was looking to see where I wanted to go, like my main thing was I want a program that actually cares about me. Number one, that actually like really cares about who I am and what I am outside of work. But it was really put on my radar because one of our third years who went to my med school and also trained me at my job really put it on my radar. And she's like, you would love it here. Like, you should really give it a shot. And like Dean, we had like a weird COVID year, so we couldn't really come and see how people were. But just from our interactions on Zoom and everything, I was like, oh, this was like a perfect fit, and I feel like I made the right choice.
Awesome. And just a reminder to our participants that as we go on, please put some questions in the chat. Anything you want to know from our residents, pick their brains. I won't put you on the spot, but let us know what you're interested in. And next up is Zoe, one of our interns.
Hey guys, I'm Zoe. I'm originally from the Tampa area down in Florida. I went to undergrad in Boston at BC, and then lived a bunch of places in between. Went to med school in South Carolina, and then now I'm back up. And I actually had the chance to rotate here, which was awesome. Actually got engaged when I was on my audition here, so I felt like it was meant to be. No, but I loved my rotation, and that was a big reason why Baystate, and the people are awesome. Like I'm freshly in it, and the people have been amazing. My first month was off service, but I'm currently in the ED and have been very supported.
Awesome, Zoe. And last up is Gabby, another one of our interns.
Hey guys, so I'm Gabby. I'm kind of different from everybody in the sense that I am from Washington State. I did undergrad in Montana. I did my med school in Washington at Pacific Northwest University. And then when I was doing all of my like various audition rotations last year, I really wanted to be in this area. And so I came and did an audition at Baystate. And I think one of the things that really stood out to me was like, yes, there was so much acuity and like there was a lot of COVID happening, but I also was seeing a lot of medicine that wasn't COVID related, which I hadn't seen on my other rotations. And so I was like, oh, that really kind of like that stuck out to me because I was seeing medicine that wasn't related to the pandemic. And that was important for me because I felt like this was a place where I could see something that wasn't, there was so many different things happening all at once that I was going to eventually see everything here. And that was very important for me. And yeah, I love the area, and being in the Northeast, it's pretty great so far.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So until there are some specific questions in our chat, I will throw out some questions that we sort of commonly get. And I was wondering if maybe for some of the second years right now, we'll throw this to the second years and put you on the spot a little bit. How do you feel like your residency experience has been so far? And do you have a couple of highlights in your training that that you've experienced so far?
Jules, you want to start with this one? Want me to take it?
I was gonna say, Dean, you want to fight?
I'd say Jules and I have had a couple of rotations together, so our highlights and lowlights are probably similar. But
Honestly, one of my highlights is working with Dr. Cataldo. No, but for real, I'll tell you all about my highlights. One of my favorite things about transitioning into second year, as much as I am a black cloud for trauma, is the trauma role. I love EM because I love the tea. I love getting the gossip and the drama, what's going on. And the trauma bay is always popping in Springfield, especially in the summer. So I've gotten a lot of good exposure there, and a lot of my best stories come from the trauma bay. And that's been a really cool role, like in airway in general, because as the second year, for every resuscitation in your pod, you will take the airway position. And that's been a really cool like step up, and you feel like you really know what you're doing, and like you really have a role that's designated, and you get really good at it. So that's one of my highlights, is definitely coming into like a more of a leadership role in the resuscitation or in the trauma bay.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the big pro, or the big thing like that's been awesome, is like the progression you make each month. Like starting at intern year, Jules and I started pretty much on CCU, which is like our cardiac ICU, and it's a very specific, very like intensive rotation to have. And I don't know, I didn't know anything about like floor medicine. I'd done like a couple weeks in medical school, like wasn't a good rounder. And so to make the like start there and then just see how much progress you make through all your months during intern year and then into second year has just been huge. And now that the acuity is just picking up, it's been awesome to actually be involved in getting procedures and doing that, which is awesome.
I'll actually echo what Dean just said. Is like, I had rotated at a couple of other EDs, and I've never seen such sick people. Like, the people in Springfield are so sick, and the pathology is so different. So I feel like the learning has really been spectacular.
Fabulous. Thank you, guys. We are getting some questions, and one of the questions was if you guys could talk a little bit about where the residents live, the overall cost of living. First of all, what is it like to live in the area?
I'll actually hop on. I am an intern, like we know, but I bought a house, which I think is something that a lot of people are like not really able to do their first year residency. And for me, it just made sense because I was moving across the country entirely, and I knew I just got a dog. She's wandering around, and I knew I wanted to have a dog, and I knew like what my limits were for, okay, like I need to have my space that is entirely where I can come home and decompress and not have people around me. And I would say that it was very easy for me to be able to buy a house as an intern, which in some places of the country, that's not going to be something that people can do. So I'll just put that out there. Here, I was able to do that. I know that a couple of the other interns were able to do that. And I think that's something that, if that's something you're interested in, this is definitely a place that it's feasible.
As far as cost of living, it's cheaper here than a lot of big cities. If you're coming from super rural places, it might be a little bit more expensive, but you can very easily get a nice apartment in the area for like $1,200 a month. Groceries are pretty cheap. We get compensated pretty well on a national average for our residency. All residents are underpaid, as we all know, but compared to other residencies, we've got pretty good compensation. You will not be starving, have to have roommates, won't be able to make rent. That won't happen while you're here.
Does anyone want to explain a little bit, maybe give some highlights about the Northampton area? Those of you who live in like Connecticut in the Enfield area, East Hampton, something like that. You want to give us a little overview?
So I lived north of Baystate my intern and second year in Northampton, which is a college town just north, about 20 minutes or so. I went to school in Amherst like Dean did. So I was familiar with the area. I had a 1-bedroom apartment that I rented. I think I paid $1,400 a month in rent there. I liked it because most of my recreational activities were outdoors right around there. So I had easy access to rock climbing, skiing, biking with the bike trail. I lived walking distance to the river, so I could just bring my kayak outside and pop it in the river, which was super nice. I did recently move to central Massachusetts. I live about 45 minutes away from the hospital right now. Several of our residents have done this, splitting the difference with partners for their commute. My partner works in Boston. I work in Springfield. We split the commute evenly. It's certainly harder living this far away, but it is something that is doable. I would not recommend living out this way if you're not doing it for a specific reason, but there are at least several of us who have done this and who continue to do this, and it's a reasonable thing to do as well.
So like completely opposite of Alex, I live a solid 5 minutes from the hospital, and it is awesome. I really enjoyed it. I am not from the area. I wasn't very familiar. So I know I was more focused on being a little bit closer to the hospital and kind of figuring out my way. And I love it. We live in a really cool area. I'm actually in a house. We have a dog and have a yard and everything. And it's been really nice. But it's kind of nice being close to the hospital, but also being right in the middle. There's a lot of great things that Northampton, East Hampton have to offer, as well as in Connecticut. And so you're kind of in the middle of it, which is definitely a nice aspect. Definitely more expensive than the Southeast for anyone in the Southeast, but pretty much anywhere in the country is going to be more expensive than the Southeast. So
Right now, my wife and I live in Northampton, and we absolutely love it. East Hampton, Northampton are two towns that are like, I would say 20 and 25 minutes north, right on the highway. So it's super easy drive. It's a cup of coffee and like half a podcast to work. I love that separation. It lets me kind of decompress on the way home, but also like get ready for shifts mentally. There's a lot to do. It's like a really cute downtown, really good music, arts, bars, breweries. So I'm a big fan of living East Hampton and Northampton.
And I'm in Connecticut. It's about a 25-minute commute, but it's easy because it's on the highway. Yeah, it's not bad. It's gotten to be really expensive here, but I think it's because they weren't allowed to increase rent during the pandemic, and now all of a sudden they're allowed to. So I'm not gonna lie, my place is pretty expensive, but I also picked a place that has like Peloton bikes in the gym and like cabanas at the pool. So it's a little bit of a hole that I dug for myself, but we're happy. We're gonna stick it out here. There are certainly cheaper places, but West Hartford is pretty close by, which has like a lot of the nice shops and restaurants and kind of more upscale areas. There's definitely outdoor things to do here as well. And it's really nice in the fall for like going to different apple orchards, pumpkin patches, that kind of thing.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So there were a couple questions also about how would you describe the interaction between residents and attendings, interns and senior residents, interns and attendings. I think that's mostly what was there.
I would love to tackle this one. So we have staffing sort of set up for each different pod, which I guess I should explain how our emergency department works. We have 4 different adult medical pods. A, B is lumped together with B pod being more behavioral health and substance use, but it's combined with AB. So you have an AB pod shift, a C pod shift, and then D pod. And then we also have a pediatric emergency department. There's no difference in acuity between those pods. It's just sort of how they're organized. If you're in those pods, there will usually be a senior resident, 1 or 2 junior residents, and then an intern. The intern does not count towards minimal staffing during their intern year. So basically you show up and you're not expected to see a ton of patients. You're there to learn how the process works, how to do things well before you have to learn how to do them quickly. The question specifically that I really liked was the interactions between senior residents and interns. I try to sit close to the interns and help them out with the hardest part of intern year, which is figuring out how the system works. When you don't know how to put in a specific order, when you don't know how do I figure out who's on call for this specialty that I need to talk to, I love being there for that. And then getting the interns to do the things that I've already done 24 times that I no longer need to learn how to do, but someone else has never done it before and I can pass that off. We get so much critical care and so many critical procedures that there's very few that you are going to get passed over for. We have roles that are 3rd years, 2nd years, and interns usually fill with regards to airways and leading resuscitations. But as an intern, you will get pulled in to do things and have a senior resident sort of helping you there, talking you through it, showing you how to do it. Because we've already done a bunch. I've already done so many lines, intubations, I don't need to do anymore. I want to show someone else how to do it. And I get excited showing up on shift and getting to teach someone how to do that. That's my favorite part of being a senior resident. And I rambled long enough, so I'll let someone else go.
I agree with Joe. I definitely, it's nice as a senior because you set the tone for, you know, kind of the culture in the ED as far as the residents and what happens with the attendings, the other staff. same thing, like I like to make sure that all the interns and the brand new twos are taken care of procedures wise, like system wise. And the relationship with our attendings is basically your friends. I think we have one attending who wears a white coat, and he's just like a research heavy, like kind of super science oriented, and it's almost like the mad professor type style. So like I love it. I think it's great, but we're super casual, super laid back. Dark humor with the attending is not unheard of, like, and it's pretty often used. So it's very relaxed, it's chill, but when it needs to be professional and supportive and academic like, then that's also there too.
And then with team structure, our pods are generally staffed with a AV pod generally has a third-year resident who is responsible for trauma roles based on odd or even days, to tackle Tom's question a little bit. So on odd days, we do procedures in the trauma bay, are responsible for the secondary exam, pass exam, etc. On even days, we run traumas. I will not do my trauma rant today, but the short version of my trauma rant is that you should not base a residency program based on your trauma experience. You will be well exposed to trauma in every single residency program that you will possibly go to. And then we have a second year typically in that pod, as well as interns and officers residents. In C pod, we always have a second year overnight. The second year is a senior resident there. During the daytime, there's oftentimes a third year resident there. The C pod second year resident goes and does all of the trauma airways, which is their kind of extra responsibility. And then in D pod, you'll have a mix of second year residents who count towards minimal staffing, APs who count towards minimal staffing, et cetera. We also oftentimes have a swing, which will give you one-on-one time with an attending. I particularly value those swing shifts because as a third year resident, getting that one-on-one time and to say like, hey, let's slow down a little bit and really talk through the finer points of these cases are things that I really value as I look forward to going into future practice where I won't have necessarily that person to bounce those ideas off of. So that gives me an opportunity to really break down and ask specific questions, as opposed to some of the times when we're in the other pods where it's like, I need to start moving people through this system as effectively as possible.
Awesome. And I will just add also, because I didn't say it before, but I was a resident at Baystate and then a med ed fellow and now old attending. But in general, I think you'll notice there is a little bit of a less formal atmosphere in that we all use each other's first names and each resident presents their patients directly to the attending. So there's not a hierarchical, like the intern presents to the senior who then, presents to the attending. Everybody's presenting directly to the attending with a focus on teaching. So your attendings are really focused on the specific things that you need as a learner and how to help guide you through that with your residents. There is no cherry picking. So you pick basically the next person who comes up. So as an intern, that may be a very sick patient, and we provide you lots of support along with your seniors. The whole team is there. But the idea is to really expose you to a lot. There isn't anything that you cannot see or do in the department. I think our residents will agree with that. And they keep mentioning the acuity, and I will just say that we're the highest acuity academic ED in the country, which means that you end up having a lot of really sick patients. And I think that's something that people feel pretty comfortable with. But I wanted to actually use that to kick it to our residents. One of the questions around, like, at least our senior residents, you're training in a 3-year program versus a 4. You guys obviously are at the beginning of 3rd year, but when you look at the people who graduated before you and how you're currently progressing, do you feel like 3 years is going to be enough to be a great emergency physician?
I'm going to take your question and twist it a little bit. I'm planning on doing a 2-year fellowship, which makes me a little bit nervous about my time in the emergency department. So I've made a particular focus of this 3rd year to picking up things that are lower acuity complaints. I feel really, really, really prepared if someone were to come into a rural emergency department where I'm a single coverage physician and they were crashing coding needed to be placed on BiPAP, intubated, needed critical care. The thing that I feel the least comfortable with is draining a palatal cyst or doing an IND on an otherwise healthy person, or saying this is somebody who is possibly someone who has lots of other medical comorbidities, but may be able to go home. And those are the things where I'm trying to really fine tune my thinking, knowing that I'm going to go into a fellowship where I will see tons of critical care in the future. And I think that having that conversation with our attendings up front has been really, really valuable for me going forward through this entire third year. I do not think that any of our residents graduate here being unable to take care of incredibly sick folks. And I would argue that our second year residents are already taking care of people that are incredibly sick and feel really, really comfortable with that from the get-go at this point now, realistically 3 months into their second year.
Follow up on Alex. I think anyone who finishes residency and feels completely confident, ready that they can take care of and do everything is probably a little bit full of themselves. You know, we have attendings who have been doing this, 30 years and are brilliant people. And every single day, every month they're seeing something they've never seen before. So I think what I guess really the goal of residency is that you learn how to not make those crucial, critical mistakes. And right now in our residency, I feel that way. I have had enough close misses and good opportunities to learn from my mistakes here. That I do feel I would be capable of, I want to go into the community, unlike Alex, who's doing a fellowship. I want to go straight into community. I feel confident that I could do that job right now, but I won't be as good as a physician, when I graduate in June, that I will be 5 years from June. And I think that's just the expectation that you have to have. I feel completely confident in the training that I've had, but I'll get out there and on my first shift, I'm going to see something that I've never seen before, and you just can't predict it.
All right. I wanted to take a second to address a couple things that probably the residents don't need to address in terms of special interests or extracurriculars. The residents here that are here actually have not experienced the international EM curriculum because of the wonderful pandemic that we are all sort of still making our way through. And so there has not been international travel. That hasn't really been an option. We do have international rotations and relationships set up. And we have a curriculum that also for electives allows you to set up your own and helps partner with that. We also have an attending joining, I think, next month, who is a global EM fellowship trained with a view of bringing more global EM to our residents. That's not something that they unfortunately have experienced since they've been here. And then there was a question about sports medicine opportunities, which is a great question. We actually have a graduate of our program who works nearby now full-time in sports medicine, who allows our residents to rotate with his clinic. If that's something you're interested in, we have another resident who this year is going to another program, sports medicine fellowship for their elective and rotating through with them. We don't have a sports medicine fellowship at Baystate, but we have lots of opportunities in partnership to go rotate in the nearby area or with someone clinic. Just see if I can catch up and let me know if
Actually,
yeah.
One quick thing with the sports medicine too is that we also have opportunities to work as a physician at the local AHL, or basically the equivalent like AAA hockey team that's in Springfield, the Thunderbirds. Let's go Birds. We got swept in the Calder Cup this year, but bringing back a lot of good players for next year. And you get paid $50 to work with you and an attending, basically sit in the stands, watch a hockey game, and then as medical things come up, you get to attend to them. So whether that's, doing laceration repair or shoulder dislocations, whatever might come up.
There was another person who expressed interest in a med-ed fellowship. And as I mentioned, I actually was Baystate's first med-ed fellow, which makes me super old. But Baystate has the option of doing a 2-year fellowship with a master's in education or a 1-year fellowship. It does not get the master's, but lots of great teaching experience. We are a very med ed heavy department, I would say. All of our ed team either runs that med ed fellowship or has gone through the med ed fellowship. And our residents start teaching really intern year to each other and others on the service. And by the time you're a third year, you directly precept med students and sort of help them tailor their presentations and evaluations before they talk to the attending, so that those medical students can give the best impression possible to the attending. There's a lot of teaching going on. So that's something that you can decide if you're interested in a med ed fellowship. And actually, my best friend from residency runs a med ed fellowship at another institution. So we have lots of people in the area if that's what you're interested in. You don't have to stay at Baystate, even though Baystate is in fact the best. There was another question about what does a change of shift and sign out process, what do those look like? How long are your shifts scheduled to be, and how long do they end up being, which I think is a genius question.
We have a great sign out culture, I will say. So typically, and Chiefs, you can correct me, because I know this is like kind of a cheap question in terms of scheduling wise, but essentially most shifts are like 7 to 4 roughly, and then like 3 to midnight. So there's a little bit of overlap. And so essentially, if you're working like the 7 a.m. Shift, you show up a little bit early, typically for second year, so like get your stuff ready for airway, but essentially the shift starts at 7 and then sign out with the next team who would be leaving at like 8 a.m. would be at 7:30. And so there's like a little bit of overlap there where you're picking up patients, but then you get sign out, then you kind of fully take over the pod, and maybe the team that's off going lingers for like half an hour. Yeah, I would say on average, it's never really like the 2 to 3 to 4 hours, like finishing notes. That's very atypical. So it's a pretty quick sign out. You sign out pretty much everything. Obviously, you don't want to sign out like procedures, but sometimes it happens. Sometimes you have to sign out a reduction, a procedural sedation, but that's the rarity. Pretty much, you wrap up, we sign out things that need to be signed out, sign out calls so you can go home and you're not like waiting for things that are silly that you don't need to stick around for. The shifts are 9 hours, but really they're like 8. That's how long you're seeing patients, and the last hour is for cleaning up things. So it's a pretty quick turnover. And then we do overnights too, which are like 11 p.m. To 8 a.m. with sign out again at 7:30. And then there are kind of these off shifts for D-pod, which is a little bit different in terms of hours, and those are different, but the length is still the same. And then PD pod, I think we're going forward just sticking to like the normal 7 a.m. shifts, 3 p.m. shifts, and then the typical overnights at 11 a.m. But really good sign out culture. You're not hanging out. My wife, who works in the ED as well, not here, but another hospital in the area, they do not have as great of a sign out culture. And so she's had to stay for things that are stupid, like a phone call or a consult calling back, or, things. And so I think we do a really good job of like, we work a lot and we work really hard, but we respect each other's time and we try and get people out on time.
Just to echo one thing that Dean said that I really like about our sign out culture. I gave him a couple sign outs the other day. I was the morning shift, so 7 to 4. And then he was part of the team that was coming on at 4 p.m. So we did our sign out at 3:30. And I had gotten a lot of resuscitations or like critically ill patients in the last hour and a half. So some of the patients that I had seen earlier in the shift, I had fallen behind on because I was taking care of sicker people. And there was one particular patient that I gave to Dean that I was like, this person needs a completely fresh look. I saw them an hour and a half ago, right before someone sick came in, and then another really sick person came in. So I haven't had a chance to go back and re-review them. And that wasn't followed by, well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? That was understood as, okay, I understand what you're saying. I've got it. Don't worry about it. And I was still able to get out at a reasonable time. So that we try to take care of each other the best that we can, because there's going to be times that you're going to give difficult signouts, and there's going to be times that you have to receive difficult signouts. It will all wash out.
I was going to echo that, exactly that, Joe. Like sometimes you do end up signing out procedures and it's really not a big deal. Like you sign out a lac repair, you feel like so crappy doing it. You're like, oh God, I really hate signing out a procedure. But the attitude you get from your oncoming residents is so positive and receptive. They're like, nah, I got to go home. Like, get out of here. Like, I don't want to see you here. And even if you're there like for 20 minutes after shift, they're like, I love seeing you, but like, get out. So there's like a very much an aggressive form of love that comes with that, just being like, get out of the department. go live your life outside.
Awesome. Speaking of life outside of the department, I was hoping to put Steph on the spot a little bit to tell us about what her experience has been having a baby during residency, a really adorable baby that I regularly sort of threaten her to steal.
This little guy. It's been great. I honestly, being pregnant during that like last wave of the pandemic was kind of crazy. But it was fun. It was empowering. This whole residency is super supportive. Sorry, I'm getting my hair pulled. Especially like, I mean, we just have a great group of people. Like when Savi was born, excuse me. I can't tell you how many meals were delivered to our door, like from my co-residents and people just offering to do whatever they could to like help us through those first couple of crazy weeks. All the faculty are supportive. I think I've maybe spent $150 on his clothing because we just get everything donated to us, including like expensive baby Bjorn Swiss seats that I like would put in an Amazon cart but never actually buy. Joe Sills, for example, one of our attendings, he's like, hey, I have this random baby chair. Do you want it? And I look at the picture and I'm like, that's like the $200 thing that I said I wouldn't buy. So super supportive, awesome, crazy ride, and totally worth it.
I love him. He's so cute. While we're on that topic, the Department of Emergency Medicine, the residency, recently sort of updated our parental leave policy, and that will include and sort of does include for the gestational partner, if they're comfortable disclosing that they're pregnant, they won't work overnight shifts in their first trimester or their third trimester, because we know that increases risk for miscarriage or preterm delivery. They're also limiting overnights in the first 3 months that a parent returns, both the gestational and non-gestational parent, because it is very hard to solo parent overnight a new little baby. So trying to have as much help at home as we possibly can have is one of our goals. We are committed to being very lactation friendly. So as somebody who had a baby in the 3rd year of residency and has nursed both of her kids for quite some time, we have lactation rooms that are set aside. You are encouraged / pushed to go take the time that you need to be able to pump or do whatever you need to feed your baby while you're on shift. There's plenty of sort of attending and resident coverage to make that happen for you. So I hope that answers some questions on maternal parental leave policy, but if you have additional questions, we're always happy to send that to you. I did also want to address super quick. So the Office of GME is not allowing like official student visitors to come through before sort of in the pre-interview season. And part of that is because looking to decrease sort of infectious disease and be responsible in the pandemic, and also a look at equity and making sure that people who can't afford to come tour are given the same consideration of people who can afford to come to the area, given that we're all virtual interviews this year. With that said, we are always happy to provide recommendations if you want to like tour around the area. It's an awesome area to be in. And we're working on our virtual, what our second look is going to look like, and it may be partially in person. With that said, our plan is to have our second look happen after we finalize our rank list. So it will not, that second look is fully for you. It will not impact where you go on our rank list. If you come, if you don't come, again, there are sort of equity issues with basing it on whether somebody can travel to see you. So there'll be more information to come out a little bit later about that. Next up, there's a question about, is there any protected time during the week for educational conferences? Anyone want to talk about that?
Educational conferences are fully protected, and regardless of what rotation you're on, you should be protected from it. And as one of the chiefs, that is a point of emphasis for us, and something that traditionally our chiefs have absolutely been very willing to go to bat for. If you are not protected from conference, that's something that we take very, very seriously. So that was my serious voice there.
Go
Also-
ahead, Zoe.
Oh, also just to jump off of that, I was off service my first month and it was definitely protected. And I thought something awesome that our chiefs did for us was make sure that our off days were not only on conference days. So we also had a day off as well as the protected conference time, which was very greatly appreciated in in that month. So I thought that was something that was awesome and definitely great that they did for us.
Anybody want to talk about work club? I can kind of jump off if you want, and you guys can chime in. Essentially, part of this protected time is our weekly conference time, but we also take some time on one of the Thursdays of each month to have what we call War Club or Wellness and Resiliency Club. That used to be Journal Club, but we'd get together at a attending's house and we'd eat and we drink, and then you'd have to sit down and sort of dissect the literature. And it turned out that part was kind of a bummer because you were really excited to catch up with people and chat with them outside of work. So we moved Journal Club into conference and moved certain conference topics outside of conference to War Club or Wellness and Resiliency Club around some wellness topics, but also some topics that are more amenable to conversation. And so, for example, the last Wellness and Resiliency Club we had was at one of our attending's house, Dr. Westifer, and we got to go hang out with her awesome kids and swim in her pool and eat and drink, and then talk a little bit about palliative care. And that was class specific, right? What the third years need to know a little bit different than what the interns need to know, but around broaching, goals of care conversations. But that was, at least my group was around a campfire. And was pretty nice conversation. You guys want to chime in about War Club?
Yes, so exactly like Ashley said, our last War Club was about palliative care, and how that looked for us was we were sitting in a nice backyard in Western Massachusetts, and there was a little fire in the middle. I had a beer in my hand. We had 2 palliative trained physicians, and it was all third year. So we were able to talk about some of the issues that we'd seen with sort of, for me, examples like getting a patient who wants hospice to hospice. How can you go about doing that? Like actually asking like real finer point things. And then there was a brief period of sort of talking about these really difficult or challenging experiences that we'd had with end of life care, both in the emergency department and outside. And when we have those topics and those conversations, it's great. And that it counts towards conference, it almost feels like it's cheating. And I love it. We're really lucky to have that as an opportunity.
Thanks, Joe. There was another question about how do you feel like the program prepares you for boards besides just doing the in-service exam? What are some resources that you have through the program?
We get free access to 2 question banks with EM Coach, and I'm forgetting the other one right now, Hippo. So we have free access to 2 question banks, which is, I just did all of the Hippo questions my intern year, and then the EM Coach questions my second year, which was absolutely way more than adequate for in-service exams and probably overkill, and wouldn't do that again. But we also do scheduled mock oral boards throughout the year. So both having our seniors do oral boards in front of the residency to kind of get that kind of anxiety and performance exposure to it, as well as doing individual oral boards for everyone in the residency. So your intern year, you will do a full day of oral boards cases during conference. which feels really, really hard, but then prepares you for what's going to come in the future when you're going to be doing them kind of in front of a bigger audience.
Fabulous.
Oh, I was going to comment one thing, Ash, if I can.
Yeah, Jules.
So maybe in the more immediate short-term view for our medical students, if you're thinking about level 3, there is an educational fund or stipend that you will get that you can get reimbursed for. So if you want to get something like ComQuest or UWorld or whatever question bank you use to kind of help you prepare for your level 3, that's built in. So that will go towards that amount that you spend on resources. But then also keep in mind that the way first year is structured, you do have quite a bit of time off service. And some of those rotations do permit more time for studying than others. So I think it's structured very nicely.
Awesome. Thank you, Jules. And I will say that the residency leadership team, you'll have someone assigned to your class who is your like primary mentor and advisor, who will go over your schedule and when's the best time to take step 3 and how to take advantage of these resources and how to tailor your board studying to you and what your requirements are. So there's definitely, Jewel, thanks. Have you noticed I haven't said you're the best class, even though you're absolutely the best class because you're my class? Just saying. But yeah, we'll help guide you through all of this when it's time. There was a question about our resident retreat, and I'm not going to allow Joe Stevens to answer that question. Would anyone like to fill in the online community about what resident retreat is?
No, I can go, Ashley. I've never worked harder in my entire medical career than I worked at the last 3 days of our residency retreat. If this was a 4-year program, I would have died in the 4th year. I left it all on the table. So our residency retreat is essentially a 3-day period where we rent a house in upstate New York, where we're completely isolated from anyone else. There's no neighbors around, there's nothing. And you just get to know all your co-residents. It's great. As an intern, you show up and you're a little bit nervous because you're like, I don't know any of these people. I know a couple interns a little bit. As a second year, you're like, wow, I know all these third years. And then, oh, these new interns, I don't know anyone, I'll be nice to them. And then as a third year, it's just a blast. I'm going to miss it next year, but it's just like eating too much candy. If I did it again, I would get very sick.
Anyone else want to add anything to that?
I'll hop on. So I kind of knew ahead of time that retreat was going to occur over my birthday this year. And this is also my first birthday that I like haven't been around family. So I was like, oh, okay, like we'll just see how it goes. I think there were like 4 or 5 birthday cakes that were purchased for my birthday. 5. Jules says 5. There was a moment where everyone came out and we were all singing happy birthday to me. And one of the other second years, we share a birthday. She unfortunately wasn't able to go because she had COVID. But yeah, so there was like a big birthday celebration. We ate cake. We were all just enjoying ourselves. And for me, that was like the best possible way I could have spent my birthday if I wasn't going to be with family, because I was just with my residency family. So it was really nice that we were just kind of all doing our thing anyways. And we do, you know, like Joe said, team building things to kind of get to know each other outside of our classes. Because I feel like at that point, the interns and kind of, we like had the opportunity to meet our, like within our class pretty well, but we just didn't know the second and third year super great. So it was awesome. And I'm glad I got to spend my birthday there.
I'll also say it's almost like doing a trust fall with 60 of your closest friends. It's kind of like where you go off into the mountains, you all just kind of get to know each other really well. And like the goal is to have that kind of trust and, you know, feeling like you can rely on your co-residents. Because honestly, when the department's on fire, you have to look to somebody that you trust to have your back. And those people are going to be with you, those 60 goons up in the mountains. So that's what that 3-day span is really meant to be. It's finding your people, knowing you can trust them, and they'll have your back when, you know, things hit the fan.
And there's a pool.
Yes, and a hot tub. We managed to get 21 people in, I want to say, last year. 21 people, I think. it is all about getting to know each other and just sort of having fun. The attending staff, the ED for those 3 days. So there are no residents there, and the idea is, we all just get to sort of bond during that time and talk about what we want for the residency's future, what it should look like, what things we want to work on for the upcoming year. We have time for a few more questions. There is one question about off-service rotation. So 2 questions, and you can answer both or only one, but one question was about the best off-service and the one that you feel like could use improvement. And then tell us about food at the hospital, yay or nay.
I'm horribly biased, but I feel like our ICU off-service rotation is a really valuable learning experience for us. I am applying for a critical care fellowship, so again, I'm horribly biased because I did it twice, and maybe the only person here who's ever done it twice. But I find that having the opportunity to see the sickest of the sick people in the area, and also learn from people who are really stoked to teach, and they view our emergency medicine residents as an absolute strength, and oftentimes really want to have more EM folks rotating through, because we get a lot of procedural responsibility as well as kind of autonomy managing those patients. On the flip side, we are actively working on the pediatric wards rotation. Part of our deal with the pediatric ICU is that we also rotate through PD wards, which for me was a difficult rotation. And I think we're working to make changes to make sure it's as educational as possible for all of our residents. It wasn't difficult in terms of medical management or people being mean. It was much more difficult in I had a lot of patients who I was struggling with to find learning points from, people who had been there for 2, 3, 4 weeks waiting for placement for psychiatric hospital placements or for specific eating disorder programs. And we're working with our pediatric hospitalists to try to make sure that we encourage our interns who rotate through PEDS wards to see things that are relevant to emergency medicine as well.
I'll echo Alex. I think our MICU rotation is incredible. We actually did it together. I was lucky to have it at the end of the year, and I got a lot of procedures. Nights, you're essentially not totally on your own, but like it's you and a fellow and a MICU, and so there's so much medicine to learn. They're excellent. They're excellent teachers. You leave that rotation with a really good foundation of certain things. I will say also anesthesia is a sweet, sweet couple of weeks. It's like all you do is show up and you get to intubate in the OR, which is awesome. You don't have to write any notes. There's no rounding. Like it's relatively shorter days. So those are pretty 2 awesome rotations that really strengthen you for the ED.
Does anyone want to comment on the food?
Just as for a question for the interns and second years, have you guys had the crispy chicken wrap? Pretty good.
About 1,000.
Yeah, it's
I
pretty
was
good.
about to call out Dr. Cataldo on that one.
It's not
Jake,
I had one every single day.
Jake is a big fan. I have not personally had one, but Jake advocates for them heavily.
oh, it's amazing. If anyone's from Florida and has had a pub sub, I would not as good as a pub sub, but like it's comparable, I'd say.
But what about the omelets?
Omelets are fire when Mary makes them. Oh my God.
Yeah. When Mary's on, they're gonna be outstanding. She should be
Mary.
working at a Michelin star restaurant. She's incredible. But in all seriousness, the cafeteria food is fine. It's not going to blow you away. You can eat it for a month when you're on your off service rotations. And we get like meal stipends every month. I don't know, or not every month, every quarter, and not, gain too much weight and feel too terrible. But yeah, you're not going to be like, hey, we're going to go out to dinner tonight. Like, oh, let's swing by the hospital and grab some cafeteria food. So.
But it's open till 3 a.m., which is huge.
And for a place that's 2.5 hours from the ocean, the sushi is not half bad. I might be the only person who eats the hospital sushi in hindsight.
I did until I saw there was like a weird buffalo chicken one, and I thought that was a little bizarre.
Buffalo chicken wrap, buffalo chicken sushi. I don't see the difference.
As
It's carbs around buffalo chicken.
as someone who ate their weight in tots on their trauma rotation as a intern, it's perfectly fine. You will get through it. And yeah, I would say it's fairly good, but it's definitely hospital food, you know. Yeah, 10 pounds of tot weight for sure. That's what I was all about. Any remaining questions for our residents that you want to pick their brains? I will say that in the chat, I saw Steph put her email address if you have questions. I put mine. Feel free to send me a question and I'll either answer or point you in the right direction. We really appreciate you guys taking the time to come out tonight to get to know some of our residents. We really take pride in matching a really fabulous group of people, of humans that we just want to hang out with. And we really enjoy working with. It makes work a lot better when you walk in and you see a bunch of your friends and you're excited to be there. So hopefully some of you will be interested in joining the next residency class with us. If you have any questions, reach out, and otherwise I think we'll say goodbye. All right, bye everybody.
Hey.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.